Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. My name is NURSYAZANA binti ARSAD. So today I want to introduce you about our topic, which is determination of prayer times. Prayer times are solah times when Muslim perform solah. The term is primarily used for the 5 daily prayers, including the Friday prayer, which is normally Zuhur prayer, but on Fridays it is obligated to be prayed in a group, which is Jamaah. Determination of prayer times is the most important astronomical data, which is the position of the sun in the coordinates of the horizon, especially the altitude or zenith distance. The phenomena that we are looking for in relation to the position of the sun are down, which means the morning twilight, rising, crossing the meridians, setting and evening twilight. In this case, astronomy plays a role in interpreting the phenomena mentioned in the religious argument in the Al-Quran and the Hadith of the Prophet into the position of the sun. And actually, the interpretation is not uniform, but because the public has agreed to accept astronomical data as a reference, the criteria are relatively easy to put together. Let's move on to next slide. For this slide, we will continue to prayer times according Al-Quran and As-Sunnah. Based on the instructions of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it can be understood that the provisions of prayer times are related to the position of the sun on the celestial sphere. So, surah that relates with the prayer times is Surah Al-Isra, verse 78. Allah says, A'udzubillahi minasyaitonirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Aqimil salata liduluki syamsi ila ghasaqil laili wa qura'anal fajri. Inna qura'anal fajri kana mashhuda. Sadaqallahul azim. The meaning is establish prayer from the declining of the sun to the darkness of the night, and hold fast to the recitation of the Quran at dawn. For the recitation of the Quran at dawn is sweetness. From this verse, the meaning of establish prayer from declining of the sun to the darkness of night is Zuhur, Asar, Maghrib and Isha prayers, and hold fast to the recitation of the Quran recitation at dawn refer to Subuh prayer. Meaning for the recitation of the Quran at dawn is witness, is the recitation and prayer at dawn, angels who is guarding at night and they be the witness at that time. In addition, hadith that related to this topic is by Aisha reported, the messenger of Allah, may peace be upon him, said the afternoon prayer at a time when the light of the sun was there in my apartment. Book 4, number 1272. That's all from me. Thank you.
Hi, my name is AIDA. So, in Islam, prayer times are identified by the position of the sun. So, even if we don't have a watch, we still have the sun to refer to when we have to pray. So, even if we are airborne, we are flying 40,000 feet above sea level, we pray according to the position of the sun. not according to the position of the country below us or the country of origin or our destination. So let's we go to the timing for 5 prayer time. We start with Zohor prayer time. Entering the time of Zohor prayer is when the sun sleeps to the west of us. That is when the eastern edge of the sun crosses the local celestial meridian. The local celestial meridian is a projection of the longitude of the local station. Next, we go to Asar prayer time. According to Mazhab Shafi'i, the time of Asar prayer is when the length of the shadow of a pillar exceeds the length of the pillar. Physically, the time of Asar can be determined by using the same vertical pole as those used at time of Istiwa. That means Asar time begins when the length of the shadow shown by the upright pole exceeds the size of the pole itself, and it's mixed with the length of the shadow during Istiwa. The Istiwa means when the center of the sun crosses the plane of the local celestial meridian. Istiwa time can be determined physically by looking at the movement of the shadow of an upright pole. Okay, next, then Maghrib prayer time. According to the law of fiqh, the time of Maghrib prayer is when all the bodies of the sun set below the western horizon. That means when the sun sets or ghurub, that is, the entire disk of the sun is invisible to the observer. Next, we go to Isha prayer time. According to Islamic law, the time of Isha prayer is when the red mega on the western horizon disappears. That means the waning of red light or Ash-Shafaq al-Ahmar in the western part of the sky, which is a sign of the entry of dark night. The substance of this information can be seen in the Quran in Surah Al-Isra verse 78. Lastly is Subuh prayer time. The beginning of the Subuh prayer time is understood from dawn to when the sun will rise, and according to Shara, is when the true dawn or Sadiq rises on the eastern horizon.
Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. My name is YASMIN binti ALIAS, and I would like to present about the astronomical time period. So the most basic astronomical unit of time is the day, which is measured in terms of Earth's rotation. So there are two types of day. The first one we call the solar day, and this is like our normal day. The solar day is the time it takes for the Earth to rotate about its axis, so that the sun appears in the same position in the sky. This is defined as 24 hours. The second type is sidereal day. This type is reference to the stars. Sidereal day is the time it takes for the Earth to rotate, so that the distant stars appears in the same position in the sky. This works out to be 23 hours 56 minutes, which is 4 minutes less than a solar day. You guys can look at the picture on the slide. Okay, imagine that you are standing on the equator at the position on the red dot, with the sun directly overhead as shown. So, the Earth rotates about 360 degrees until the second dot. But on the second dot, the sun is not directly overhead with the second dot. So, the Earth needs to add extra 1 degree of rotation to get the sun back overhead. And remember that the solar day needs a 361 degree rotation of the Earth. This is because the Earth moves around the sun whilst it is rotating. So this is what we call the 24 hours. Next, we move to the two types of the instrument to calculate the prayer times, which is astrolabe and rubuk mujayyab. The rising and setting of the sun, as well as fixed stars, were used to determine the qiblah, which is the direction in which to face when praying. This means that the astrolabe was ideal for qiblah calculation, as the reed makes this calculation simple and quick, because most are also aligned according to the qiblah. Astronomical calculation may have been used to determine their location and orientation. There were other mathematical methods for estimating the qiblah that were used to construct the qiblah tables for various locations that are commonly seen in astronomical table collection. A prayer line appears on most Islamic astrolabes, indicating the timings of the 5 daily prayers: sunset, darkness, daybreak, lunchtime, and mid-afternoon, which is the Islamic day begins with the rising of the moon at sunset. Night prayers are defined by twilight states, while daylight prayers are defined by shadow. They differ by latitude and are all dependent on the location of the sun. As a result, the astrolabe is perfectly suited to calculating prayer times. Indeed, by the 13th century, the muwaqqit, a most professional astronomer, was a well-established institution. The muwaqqit calculated prayer times, as well as making instruments, giving people lectures, and writing treatises on astronomical matters. Astronomical table for prayer times required to be used in conjunction with an instrument to check whether the time recommended in the table had arrived. The most common equipment being astrolabes and sundials. Rub mujayyab is derived from the Arabic words, which is rub meaning a quarter, and mujayyab is context marked with sign instrument. While in English term for rubuk mujayyab is cynical quadrant. There are various definitions about rubuk mujayyab. The early period of Islamic glorious, rubuk mujayyab is perhaps the most famous in astronomy. This is origin instrument was invented by Muslim astronomers in the golden age of Islam. The most famous is Al-Biruni, Ibn Shatir, Al-Khwarizmi, and others. Absolutely, rubuk mujayyab is like a device, have a simple design but very impressive and incredible of abilities. Exclusively, as Muslim, this tool is guidance to perform regular worship such as prayer and fasting. Some of them have to be completed certain times and some to be done on specific time. Every Muslim can consider confidently when it prayer time or when the appearing sunset to break fast in Ramadan. One of the most investors of rubuk mujayyab in Islamic world is Ibn Shatir or Ala al-Din Abu Hassan Ali ibn Ibrahim ibn al-Shatir, who is Syrian born. In addition, Ibn Shatir worked as muwaqqit or religious timekeeper at the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, Syria, which he called Sanduk al-Yawaqit. Ibn Shatir made contribution to Islamic astronomy in the field of planetary theory. He wrote on the ordinary planispheric astrolabe called Al-A'la al-Jami'a, which is the universal instrument. Also described the two most important use quadrant, which is the astrolabic and trigonometric. Rubuk mujayyab produced from wood material that in the edge have degree measurement. In the middle of him indicator needle that can move. Then Ibn Shatir continued to make astronomical tools at an advanced age for the creation of rubuk mujayyab. Rubuk mujayyab that possessed by Ibn Shatir made from metal, which described as equipment which contains grid global trigonometry. From outside view, like a part of astrolabe with elliptic circle sun, but it is replaced from astrolabe. Hence, furnish a few lines related to find Kaabah direction and calculate times prayer. Also, used to measure height, sun or other planet. Nowadays, Rubuk Mujayyab that generated by Shate expanded and is still used by Universal Society, especially in Sumatra. Apart from that, he also write 30 book, which are mainly in field astronomy. There is Zaij Ibn Ash-Shati, Risalah fi al-Hay'ah al-Jadidah, An-Nujum as-Sahira fi al-Amal bi al-Rub'i al-Mujib bil-Amari wala Da'irah, and Risalah fi al-Amal bi Daqa'iq Ikhtilaf al-Afaq al-Mar'iyah, and so on. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is NURSYAZANA binti ASIDI and I will present about the calculation of prayer times from beginning and ending in Islamic and astronomy ways. First, I will tell you about istiwa. What is istiwa? Istiwa is the best method of revision to obtain the accurate Qibla direction. It is also the calculation of prayer time using a mathematical formula is based on the position of the sun during istiwa. That is when the sun is in the local meridian. The local meridian is in the imaginary line connecting north and south that passes through the zenith, which is point above the head of an area. When the istiwa phenomenon occurs, the shadow of the pole will be at the shortest size. When the phenomenon occurs, it is also resulting the shadow. The shadow will show the exact Qibla direction that is facing the Kaabah. According to astronomical calculation in Malaysian Standard Time, the phenomenon of istiwa sun will occur on 28 May and 16 July each year. We continue the presentation with the calculation of each prayer times. First is Fajr prayer times. The prayer starts with the beginning of new day at dawn. There are two different descriptions of dawn. When first light appears at the horizon. Second, when the light of the early day spread horizontally across the horizon. Fajr is to be performed at the second dawn known as Subuh Sadiq or Fajr Sadiq and ends just before sunrise. Before the appearance of Fajr Sadiq, Fajr Kazib is seen first. The light from the Fajr of Kazib appears in the form of a vertical light, while the Fajr of Sadiq appears in the form of a horizontal light. The Fuqaha also agree that the time of the dawn prayer is fixed when the sun is in a position below 18 degrees below the horizon, and the end of the dawn prayer time when the sun rises on the eastern horizon. Next is Zohor prayer times. The noontime prayer performed when the sun declines after touch the highest position, which is Zawal, in the sky zenith. According to different school of thought, Zuhur is performed after 5 minutes past to the zenith. Zuhur ends at the start of Asar time. At Zuhur prayer times, the sun moves from the eastern sky across the local meridian and onwards to the western sky. The time taken by the sun to cross the meridian line is for 1 minute 4 seconds. Then, the time of Zuhur prayer is set according to the formula below. If a stick is erected across the meridian line, it is likely that it may produce a shadow or not. For example, in the first week of March and the second week of September, in Malaysia, no shadows are produced. But for June and December, the shadows are more noticeable. Asar prayer times depends on the length of the shadow of a stick fixed in the ground. According to Hanafi school, Asar timing starts when the length of the shadow becomes twice in the original length of the original length of the object. Whereas Shafi'i school said Asar begin when the length exceeds the length of the object. This concept is based on the time when there is very little or no zenith shadow at equinox. However, when there is a zenith shadow at noontime, the length of this shadow should be also accounted for in determining the beginning of Asar prayer time. Hence, to calculate the Asar prayer, there are three parameters should be considered. First is the zenith shadow at noontime. Second, the sun elevation angle. And third is the hour angle, which is defining the time offset for the height of shadows to reach object's length. Since the direction of the shadow is not of interest to us, the zenith angle is kept positive and its magnitude is only considered. And the ending of Asar prayer times are when the Maghrib prayer times begin. Maghrib prayer. The prayer performed just after sunset. However, physical conditions like refraction of light or height of the building in a city leads us to fix the time of this prayer 3 minutes after the theoretical time of sunset and ends at start of Isha. And I also give the example of formula or the calculation of Maghrib prayer times in astronomy ways. For Isha prayer times, the timing of Isha prayer starts at dusk. There are two types of dusk, both called shafaq. Just after sunset, when the sky is in the red color, it is known as shafaq al-ahmar, and later, when the red color disappears, it is known as shafaq al-abyad. The major scholars thought that Isha prayer times either at the disappearance of shafaq al-ahmar and the disappearance of shafaq al-abyad. These twilight are the mirror image of one another and correspond to certain sun depression angles which is after and before the sunset. Therefore, there is no precise and universal depression angle for Isha times. Across to the board and different views exist for the base and the practical angle. However, the existence of light is very short and difficult to detect in countries of low latitude. Then it is concluded that the end of Isha prayer times is when the time of dawn prayer enters. The lastly is the declination of the sun. The declination of the sun is the angle between the equator and a line drawn from the center of the earth to the center of the sun. The seasonal variation of the declination angle is shown in the animation below. The change in the sun's declination is also caused by the motion of the earth in its orbit. Earth makes one nearly spherical orbit around the sun in 1 year. Therefore, as the earth revolves in its orbit, each pole will alternate violently towards and out of the sun. From this moment, a change in time can be determined at any time. The sun's declination is characteristic of the equinox and changes most rapidly during the time. The declination reaches its maximum at the solstice and the value is equal to the value of the ecliptic inclination. For residents in the equatorial region as well, the sun will be seen rising exactly at 90 azimuth east only on two dates, which is March 21st and September 23, and the solar declination, which is the sun declination angle, are 0.
My name is Muhammad FIRZAL HAIRE bin YUSRI, and I would like to explain the other methods used to determine the prior times is with Gnomon shadow stick. What is Gnomon shadow stick? Gnomon shadow stick is also one of the methods used in determining the time of prior. The shadow nail, or another noun, the gnomon is a member of the sundial that form the shadow. The term gnomon comes from the ancient Greek and means indicator, interpreter, or revealer. This method is implemented by placing a stick under the sun and then producing a shadow. Thus, the resulting shadow will determine the time at that time and be one of the ways in which the previous people determine the time of prior. For your information, according to the history of this gnomon, a painted stick dating from 2300 BC has been found excavated at the astronomical site of Tausi and is the oldest known gnomon in China, and at that time began the widespread use of gnomons in ancient China from the 2nd century BC in determining the change of seasons, orientation, and geographical latitude. In some ancient texts, it has been mentioned that the ancient Chinese used shadow measurements to create calendars. This method of Gnomon shadow stick is very familiar with us because this method is closely related to the solar clock, where it is also one of the ways the ancient of Muslim set the hour time and prayer time. The solar clock that is probably the oldest in the Islamic world is the Istiwa stick in Jannat Mosque in Yemen. Just to let you know, the stick still exists to this day and is named as the stick Asa of Muaz ibn Jabal. Throughout the history of Islamic astronomy, we find so many contributions that have been contributed by Islamic astronomers through research and writing that they do. And one of them is about the theory and making of the solar clock, which is very convenient to the ancient in the determining the time as well as can determine the time of prayer. So next, I will explain how this gnomon shadow stick is used to determine the time of the o'clock. The solar clock consists of, as a first call, a dial table, which is marked on the dial table with a set of hour lines and a rod that is a gnomon that will produce a shadow that will form on the dial table. The position of the dial table can be changed to several conditions with the horizontal, vertical, or inclined at the certain angle. As for the gnomon, it can be adjusted based on the dial table parallel to it and can also point to a point on a celestial pole or perpendicular to the dial table. And that's how the gnomon shadow stick is used.
For the conclusion, according to Shara Zuhur, prayer time is when the position of the sun slips, while the time of Asar prayer is when the shadow of an object the same length as the object, while the time of Maghrib prayer is when the sun has set until the magnificent red has not disappeared or as long as the majestic red still exists. For the time of the Isha prayer, which is start when the magnificent red disappears until dawn, in another narration until midnight or half the night, and for the Fajr prayer time, it is when dawn rises. The beginning of the Asr prayer times is in astronomy. It stated that the height of the sun is equal to the zenith distance from the center of the sun at the time of its culmination plus the number 1. Furthermore, the beginning of the Isha prayer time, marked by the waning of red light, which is Ash-Shafaq al-Ahmar, in the western part of the sky, which is a sign of the entry of dark night. The height of the sun at that time was 18 degrees below the horizon. The west and the zenith distance of the sun was 108 degrees, or equal to negative 18 degrees. As for the beginning of Fajar prayer times, it is understood from dawn until the time the sun will rise. We know that the instruments to calculate prayer times, which is Astrobal and Rubuk Mujayab, in order to determine the prayer times, the previous people used the method of diamond shadow stick. That's all from us. Thank you.